Subic Bay. For decades, this was the largest American naval base outside the United States. Thousands of personnel, nuclear submarines, aircraft carriers, the anchor of American power in Asia. Then in 1992, the Philippines shut it down, kicked out the Americans, reclaimed the land. 33 years later, it just reopened. The question everyone is asking, why now? The answer seems obvious: China. But that is not the real question. The surface answer is simple. Chinese aggression forced the Philippines to reverse a decision made 3 decades ago, 2012, Scarborough Shoal. The Philippines loses control. China never leaves. 2016, International Court rules for the Philippines. China calls it worthless paper. 2023. Chinese Coast Guard uses water cannons on Filipino troops, trying to resupply their own outpost. This happens in Philippine waters. The incidents increase every year. Harassment, blockades, intimidation. China takes more territory. The Philippines loses more control. So President Marcos makes the call: reopen Subic Bay, bring back American forces, counter Chinese pressure with American presence. That explanation works. It makes sense. But it raises a bigger question. Why did the Philippines close Subic Bay in the first place? You need to understand what happened in 1992. Because the decision to close these bases was not about China. China was weak then, irrelevant. This was about Philippine sovereignty, national pride, and a vote that changed everything. Subic Bay Naval Base. At its peak, this was a city, 45,000 American military personnel and dependents. Filipino workers numbered over 32,000 on 6,000 hectares. Repair facilities that could service aircraft carriers, ammunition depots, housing, schools, hospitals. Add Clark Air Base 50 kilometers away, and the Philippines hosted the 2 largest American military installations in Asia. The deal was simple. America gets bases. The Philippines gets protection and rent money. Both sides win against the Soviet threat. Then 1986, People Power Revolution. Marcos falls. Corazon Aquino takes power on a wave of nationalism and democratic reform. 1987. New Constitution, Article 68, Section 25. Foreign military bases require a treaty ratified by the Senate and approved by national referendum if requested. June 1991, Mount Pinatubo erupts. Second largest volcanic eruption of the 20th century. Clark Air Base gets buried in ash. Tens of billions in damage. The Americans abandon Clark. Too expensive to rebuild. But they still want Subic Bay. Negotiations begin. The Americans offer $203 million per year for a 10-year lease. The Philippine government wants more. Talks stall. September 16, 1991. The Philippine Senate votes on the treaty. 12 senators vote to reject. 11 vote to approve. By one vote, the treaty fails. The senators who voted no made their case clear. The bases represented colonial mentality. The rent was too low. The Philippines should stand on its own. Sovereignty matters more than money. November 1992. The last American forces leave Subic Bay. The Philippine flag goes up. The era of American bases ends. For many Filipinos, this was independence finally realized. True sovereignty. The end of colonial presence. For Olongapo City and the surrounding area, this was economic disaster. 32,000 jobs gone. An entire regional economy built around the base suddenly collapsed. Unemployment spiked to 50%. The Philippines chose sovereignty over security, pride over pragmatism. And in 1992, that choice seemed safe. China was not a threat. The Soviet Union had collapsed. The Cold War was over. But that raises the third question, the real question. What changed between 1992 and now that made the Philippines reverse the most controversial political decision in modern history? The obvious answer is China got stronger. But that is still not the complete answer. Because the real question is this: what changed in the Philippine calculation of sovereignty itself? 1992, the Philippines bets on a different future. Economic development without military dependence. Regional cooperation, ASEAN unity. Peaceful rise alongside neighbors. For a while it works. The economy grows. China is a trading partner. Tensions exist but stay manageable. The decision to close the bases looks vindicated. Then 2012 Scarborough Shoal, April 2012. Philippine Navy detects Chinese fishing vessels in Scarborough Shoal, 124 nautical miles from the Philippines. Well, within the exclusive economic zone, Philippine ships move to arrest the fishermen. China sends government ships. The standoff begins. Both sides refuse to back down. The United States mediates. Both sides agree to withdraw. The Philippines pulls back first as a goodwill gesture. China never withdraws. Chinese Coast Guard occupies Scarborough Shoal. Filipino fishermen get blocked from waters they fished for generations. The Philippines protests, files diplomatic complaints, appeals to international law. China ignores everything. Scarborough Shoal becomes Chinese-controlled territory. The lesson: international law means nothing without enforcement. Goodwill gets exploited. Weakness invites aggression. Then China starts building islands. 7 reefs in the Spratly Islands. Dredging operations turn underwater features into military bases. Runways, radar stations. Missile emplacements. 2016. The Arbitration Tribunal rules. China's 9-dash line has no legal basis. The artificial islands violate Philippine sovereignty. Complete legal victory for the Philippines. China's response: the ruling is fade to waste paper, operations continue. Construction accelerates. Second lesson: legal victories without military backing are symbolic. You can win in court and still lose on the water. The harassment intensifies. Chinese Coast Guard rams Philippine boats. Water cannons hit Filipino sailors, laser pointing at Philippine aircraft. Blocking resupply missions to troops on 2nd Thomas Shoal. Filipino Marines living on a rusting World War II ship. Eating expired rations because resupply gets blocked. Facing 40 Chinese vessels every time help tries to reach them. Third lesson: sovereignty you cannot defend is sovereignty you do not have. By 2023, the Philippines has lost effective control over Scarborough Shoal, faces constant pressure at 2nd Thomas Shoal, and cannot develop resources in Reed Bank because Chinese ships chase away any exploration vessels. The Philippine military does the math. China has 700 ships. The Philippines has 37. China spends $230 billion on defense. The Philippines spends $4 billion. In a direct confrontation, the Philippines loses in days. And here is where the calculation changes. The question in 1992 was, does hosting American bases compromise Philippine sovereignty? The question in 2024 becomes, does losing territory to China because you lack military power mean you have sovereignty at all? In 1992, protesters said sovereignty means no foreign troops on Philippine soil. In 2024, fishermen cannot fish. Troops cannot be resupplied. Resources cannot be developed. All on Philippine territory. The paradox: you close the bases to protect sovereignty, but without the security those bases provided, you lost sovereignty anyway. Not legally, but practically. So President Marcos faces the same question his father's regime never had to answer directly. What is sovereignty worth if you cannot exercise it? The answer: sovereignty is not about foreign troops on your soil. Sovereignty is about whether you control your own territory, develop your own resources, and protect your own people. If American presence at Subic Bay means Filipino fishermen can fish, Filipino troops can be resupplied, and Filipino energy companies can drill for oil and gas, then American presence enables sovereignty rather than undermining it. The Philippines did not abandon the principle of sovereignty by reopening Subic Bay. The Philippines redefined sovereignty as something that requires power to exercise, not just legal rights to claim. So Subic Bay reopens, American ships dock again. Chinese aggression gets countered. Every country in Southeast Asia is watching. Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, all face Chinese pressure. All wonder, should we invite Americans back too? But here is the question nobody is asking yet. What happens in another 30 years? China's population is collapsing. The economy is slowing. Internal pressures are building. What happens when China is no longer strong enough to threaten its neighbors? What happens if American domestic politics shift again? What happens if the United States decides Asia is not worth the commitment? Does the Philippines build enough capability in the next 30 years to stand independently? Does ASEAN develop collective security that works without external powers? Or does the Philippines become dependent on American presence the same way it was from 1898 to 1992, except now by choice instead of by colonial imposition? In 1992, the Philippines chose independence and lost security. In 2024, the Philippines chose security and accepted dependence. The question is whether the Philippines can build toward a future where you have both. Security without independence, independence without security. The Philippines has tried both in the last 30 years. Maybe the next 30 years are about finding a third option. Subic Bay is open again. The largest American naval base in Asia is operational. Chinese aggression meets American deterrence. 33 years full circle. The question is not whether this was the right move now. The question is whether this builds towards something better later. Stay informed. Subscribe to Global Pulse, because the decisions made today determine what choices exist tomorrow. The bases are back. The question is, what comes next?